show. Yeah, it looks like it. I don't have the fundraiser open yet, but in the future, you probably could go to feedthebadger.com/support, help us out. In the meantime, you can go to feedthebadger.com/justthetip to send us a tip and maybe send us a message if you would like to have us respond. Once again, that's feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And yeah.
Don't tell us not to accept rides from three-legged camels. We already know.
Yeah. Okay.
Pressure tips are needed.
Okay. My brain is scrambled today for some reason. I'm really sorry, guys.
All right, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
It's too early for that shit.
Hey, can't be too early for that shit. That's ancient. I literally stole that from Bazooka. Like, you remember the old Bazooka gum that you get?
Yeah, early in the morning.
And there was a comic in there.
It's too early in the morning.
Joe joke. Come on.
And look at this. I can play with this thing behind me. Look at that.
I have pajamas with that texture on them.
Yeah, look at that.
Somewhere.
Look at the plaid. Isn't it awesome?
Plaid is always beautiful.
Exactly.
Allison, I object.
Well, okay.
All right, it's too early for a seizure.
So you're gonna get a seizure from that mild animation of plaid.
Oh God!
No, I just checked the vertical. It seems fine now.
Spirally circles.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
just as long as it's not accompanied by a search.
Spirally circles. No. Look at this shit. Look at that. Be mesmerized.
Okay, I'm not.
Be hypnotized.
I'm not looking at
no.
it.
Give me your wallet.
Okay, and this one I agree with Karen. I'm not looking.
All right. Well, I'll put this one up. How's that? Nice little pyrotechnics.
Okay,
that's fine. New Year.
That's fine for the new year, and also in honor of this Tesla Cybertruck.
No, I don't know if I should do it. Actually, you're right, because it did have all those little spinny fireworks coming off.
Yeah, no, it was like loaded up with gas cans and all kinds of shit and fireworks, and then he apparently he parked in front of the building and then shot himself in the head just after he pushed the button to explode everything, which is probably prudent, because if you know that there's going to be a fire engulfing your body, you probably want to die before that happens.
Yeah, well, you avoid
you probably don't want to feel it.
The excruciating pain of being roasted to death like a...
Yeah, apparently, like, pretty much everybody who kind of has an idea of, what things feel like, contrary to what feminists would say, dying by fire is probably the most painful way. They'd say dying by childbirth,
of course,
is the most painful. And, I can vouch for the fact that it's pretty fucking painful giving birth, but, All
right. So I did...
At least have a baby at the end of it, hopefully.
So I took a deeper look at his sources. That's Exptriarch. I'm always going to say expatriate. You know that? It's always going to be in the tip of my tongue. Exptriarch sources, which are in his low bar, as far as I know, from the last time I checked. Also, we had a back and forth in his comments until he stopped talking to me. For whatever reason. Actually, what he did was he said, I don't want to debunk you anymore because I feel like you are too fragile.
Oh my God.
What?
Like something the brain would say from Pinky and the Brain.
You're too fragile.
I have done too much damage.
I never hear that from in arguments. When I get into arguments with MRA men, they don't pull their punches. I like arguing with them a lot more because feminist men always do this. They use the pretense of pulling their punches to get out of arguments when they are losing.
Yeah.
And they just pretend, oh, well, you're a woman, you can't keep up.
Or, oh, well, you're a woman, I wouldn't want to hurt your feelings. Yeah.
I've never heard any of that sexist bullshit from MRA men, not even MGTOW. right? Everybody claims that MGTOW are so sexist. No, they're just defending themselves. And they don't act like that. They don't act like women are fragile and can't handle stuff. They acknowledge that some women choose not to. But feminist men either treat us like we're fragile little delicate flowers that can't be expected to handle the same shit that men do, or like we're not as intelligent because we're not men. And it is because we're not men that they're viewing us this way, or that we're manipulated because we're not men, that we can't hold the same opinions as men without being made to hold them by men.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's kind of pathetic. It pretty much undermines their entire
argument
feminist...
that women are like equally intelligent, equally capable, equally competent, equally strong.
And their pretense at believing any of that.
Yeah.
I suspect he said that as a way of bowing out of the argument.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
In the most snide way possible. It's like, oh, you are too weak to handle my bants. So I'm going to leave now because I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to be an accessory to manslaughter or something.
Oh, what a dipshit.
Woman slaughter. I think
woman slaughter.
Irredeemable dipshit.
Femicide. I don't want to risk a femicide by subjecting you to my superior arguments. Okay.
That's one that really gets me, right? Because homicide means killing a human being, not killing a man.
Yeah.
So in inventing the term femicide, feminists just made the claim that women are not human.
Yeah.
So there goes the argument that women's rights are human rights.
Yeah.
Or the intention is to essentially elevate womanhood is something men above men. It's like it's a special kind of murder that is far more egregious.
Women are a special kind of human.
Yeah, they are.
When
They're
they
a special
elevate
kind of human. Exactly.
Yeah,
when they elevate men as a special kind of human that has special kind of responsibilities and special kind of obligations, they use that as an argument to take away rights.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, it's almost like they do this stuff as what they do has nothing to do with logical arguments. It's just about grasping at power, like a desperate
While we're talking about special kinds of humans, there's also the Special Olympics.
True.
Anyway,
which as a woman, I don't want to be. I don't want women to, in general, be lumped in with special. I would just rather have us be like maybe equal but different.
Like back in the day.
Yeah. That could be beneficial. All right, so here is the stuff that I researched. All right, first of all, Smith is the person that he cites the majority of his information from is Smith. And as we went through, Barbara Smith is, I'm not sure if she's a lawyer, but she's definitely looking at things from a feminist point of view. And after she does her rundown of the law, which doesn't actually cite law, it's just a series of summaries and very much taken from Blackstone's commentaries, except where it doesn't benefit her argument. And then she gets into the opinion piece, which is what he cites. So it's remarks. She calls it remarks, but it's essentially an opinion piece. On the intent of the law. And she proposes that the intent of the law is to benefit men over women. So to make it so that men can derive benefit from their wives' finances. And we went over the fact that prior to changes as a result of the Industrial Revolution, most women didn't have jobs outside the home. Outside the home, in which they would have their own income. And it wasn't because it was a bias against women. It was because the only jobs available literally required men's physical strength to do. It was after the revolution that you see, after the Industrial Revolution, that you see the rise of a clerk class or department store workers, or work that basically is women functionally capable of doing. Prior to that, it was a lot more dangerous. It was a lot more difficult. Had involved a lot more physical strength to even survive it. So that's one thing to point out. And yes, women worked in the mines, but they didn't work in the more dangerous aspects of the mines, which is why they could be, like in the Victorian era, they could be excluded from that work. But anyway, so there wasn't really a situation, especially for upper class women, where they were capable of earning an income outside the home. Now, for lower class women, they often had an income coming from like being domestic servants, being laundresses, other like
governesses,
and stuff like that. So working class women might have an income like that.
Cooking for other families was pretty lucrative, in fact.
Yeah. But however, when you're talking about working class, you're talking about people who don't have the luxury of extra income. So everything was just going to necessity. So this wasn't something that became an issue. It wasn't until upper class women started to earn their own income, and that income didn't have to go to necessities. That's the critical point. Nobody's arguing about income if it's all going to necessities. So, and these upper class women did not want their husbands to have control over their income. Now, their husbands were still obligated to their debts and their upkeep, but basically what she had the attitude, these upper class women had the attitude of what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine.
Yeah. And well, what's mine is mine and what's yours is ours, honey.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So because of this change, the laws that covered marital finances, and again, as Hannah brought up, you could arrange your finances maritally in any way you wanted prior to getting married. You didn't have to go with the default. Your family could create a trust for you. You could put property outside of what your husband would be able to control. So essentially,
and if you were an adult, you were femme sole before you got married. You could do anything that any femme sole could do, including make legal exceptions prior to the marriage.
Yeah, so that you have to consider that as well. But the real issue here is that the law wasn't keeping up with the changes in what was happening in terms of job market, in terms of property. In the old world,
circumstances on the ground,
circumstances on the ground. In the old world, you couldn't get rid of land. Like in the new world, you could buy and sell land. In the old world, it wasn't possible. You had that land; it was to your family. That was it. So if a man took control of a woman's land, it wasn't going to go anywhere. He couldn't sell it. It was only the property market existed in North America, which is why you have all of these amendments to the law in North America related to protecting women's property against sale by their husbands. All right. So, but in the old world, you weren't selling that. Like the value of the land is the living you could make off of it. It wasn't selling it. So, I mean,
in fact, I don't think people understand today the way that evolved, because if you look at English common law in the old land, it wasn't that the land was your property and your right. It was that the land was your place and your responsibility. Yeah. So if you were a land baron, if you were a lord, if you were a property owner on any level, it wasn't that you were a property owner. It was that you were property controller in the name of the king. And you were responsible not only for the administration of that property, but also of the people who lived on it and worked it, your serfs. When people moved to the new countries that became the United States and Canada and Australia and everything, there was land that had not been owned by anybody in the old country. And so when you got that property, you weren't controlling it in the name of the king. It wasn't part of somebody's barony. It wasn't part of somebody's responsibility. You didn't have serfs. You didn't have people you were responsible except for your own family. It was for your use, and it was your right. And that was a huge change, a huge difference. It's like the difference between your job and your responsibilities at your job and your home and your responsibilities at your home. At your home, you're responsible for yourself.
Or the small business that you own.
You own a small business. Well, that's been my experience with my home all my life, so I didn't even think of that. But yeah, it's like the difference between your workplace and your home business. And I've actually never lived in a home where a home business wasn't, even when it was my home. I have a home business now.
So the ultimate point is that things were changing on the ground. And the proposal by Barbara Smith is that instead of just simply being a situation where circumstances were changing, the law is a very conservative institution, so it doesn't always go in lockstep with the circumstances that exist. She proposes that this is a deliberate effort by men to actually suppress women. All right. And then one of the downstream effects of this is that the situation for men as a result of this law is ignored, because it's just assumed that they have a better situation than women, and they don't have to be considered when changing the law, which then leads to the situation that Karen was talking about with the suffragette, I believe, who got her husband jailed.
Elizabeth Wilkes
got her sick husband jailed for her debts. Her taxes on her income. So he was responsible for paying her taxes on her income. And he was unable to pay because he did not have her income. He had no access to her income as a result of the change in
he had no
law.
access to her private financial information either.
Yeah.
So even if he had the money to pay it, he had no right to know how much he was required to pay.
Yeah, exactly. So this was the downstream effect of the advocacy of women like Barbara Smith in ignoring the situation for men, so that we don't change the situation for men. So excesses like a sick man going to jail and then subsequently dying don't happen. This is, so this is the situation. He's using this particular document to propose or to undergird his narrative about patriarchy in the past. And again, it is cherry picked. It's looking at a very narrow situation. It is somebody who herself is biased and is presenting an opinion on intention, which is something that I really, really hate about what people do with history. Is what we're looking at when we're looking at legal history and written history is basically just a skeleton, fragments of a skeleton. And from that, we are inferring all kinds of things about our ancestors' motives. I don't think that's a reasonable thing to do. But regardless, this is the situation. This is what he's presenting. He's presenting a feminist opinion piece from the 1850s, I believe, as fact. A feminist opinion piece that went on to influence law that became extremely destructive towards men because they hadn't considered the obligations placed on men, because she framed it in a way that it was just anti-woman. And once you frame something as anti-women, people's brains turn off. They open their wallets and they tell me, insert instructions, please.
Well, you can, but, going back historically, right, and looking at, drawing opinions from, like, what was actually happening, right, you can do that, right? You can see, by reading the Federalist Papers, say, what the framers of the Constitution were thinking when they actually wrote the Constitution. Like, why did they do things? Why did they arrange things the way they did, right? You can infer that from all of those documents, right? You can infer that everybody in England, including women 35 and older, and then later 21 and older, got the right to vote because men were conscriptable, and there's no class system in a foxhole, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're a baron or if you're a peasant, like, you're still in the same fucking foxhole, right? And if he's fit to fight, he's fit to vote. You can look at all of the arguments. You can actually do an examination of those arguments that were made before laws were changed, right? Before a constitution was written. All of those discussions, those are generally documented, and so you can actually ascertain the intent behind a given set of laws. But when it comes to, like, coverture, nobody wants to look at what the actual intent was, and we know what the intent was, right? We know what the intent of marriage is. It's called matrimony. It's not called patrimony. It's called matrimony, and matrimony is the state of motherhood, right? And the whole purpose of marriage, the holy state of matrimony, was to assign a man, right, to support and protect the mother and any children that were born within that state of matrimony, right? Okay, so we can infer all kinds of things from history, right, and all kinds of things from etymology, but you would normally include arguments that involve the documents and the discussions and the debates and all of that precede these changes or the establishment of these laws. You would include all of that. You would look into all of that. You wouldn't just bald-face say it, right? Oh, men only had coverture in order to oppress women and control their incomes. No, that's absolutely not the fucking case. Like the economic unit, like the family was always an economic unit. And so you're looking at a situation where you have a household with a family and everybody's working. Everybody's working. Mom's working, dad's working, all the kids are working. They're all working, right? And they're all contributing to the economy of the household, right? And, the women were largely the arbiters of what went on within the household economically, and the men were the arbiters of generally what went on outside the household economically. And, even looking at it from like the perspective of how farming used to work, right? When you look at cultures where they don't use animals in farming, right? Women do a lot of the gardening. They do a lot of the planting and the harvesting and all of that, the plowing, right? They plow with a hoe, right? With a hand tool, basically. And they can do that, and so can kids, right? But once you get into this situation where you need an ox and an ox-pulled plow, right? Only men are really capable of operating that, of doing that. So once you scale up, the man is working further away from the house, and the woman is working closer to the house, and that's just how it goes, right? So it's like, I don't know, it's infuriating that they would say that anybody would say unevidenced by any of the debates, any of the, like sort of the philosophical and legal debates behind it, that, coverture existed solely to oppress women and control their earnings and their property.
Well, they do it because it's a very convenient narrative to get what they want. Let's face it. Like, they do it because it's the opposite. When you look at the history of all of these laws relating to men's control over aspects of their wives, whenever a man used that not to benefit his wife, there was an outcry to benefit himself instead of his wife. There was an outcry and a removal or a change in the law. That's what you see historically. This stuff, nobody had the will. Our ancestors did not have the will or the desire to create a situation where men could benefit themselves at the expense of their wives. Then you see this consistently. There was that one law where a man could put his wife, commit his wife, not without the consent of actual professionals in the field, but he had the ability to commit his wife to a sanatorium, right? And there was a man who did that because his wife was disagreeing with him, and the actual psychiatrist at the time, the guy who was the head of the sanatorium, said, "I'm not doing this anymore. She just disagrees with you. There is nothing wrong with her. We are not continuing to keep her here." And then the husband subsequently kept her in the house, and that was absolutely against the law. That was unlawful confinement.
That's he restrained her. Unlawful confinement.
Unlawful, and that is in Blackstone. That is against the law. People found out about it because, so this is a criminal at this point. This is a man who is kidnapping a woman at this point. And and there was a huge outcry over this entire situation. They not only got him on unlawful confinement, which again it's illegal for a man to do that to his wife at that time. They also changed the law so that men couldn't commit their wives to sanatoriums. And again, this isn't a situation where they expected men to be like, oh, my wife disagrees with him. Oh, away to the madhouse with her. This was a situation where they thought that women would need some kind of medical care, wouldn't be capable of, or of sound mind and capable of committing themselves to it. And a man would do that for them, for their own benefit. The instant a man used it for his own benefit, everybody was like, what the hell? That guy has to go. And that's consistent throughout the law when it comes to men and women.
There's another thing that can be added to this, all right? And it's, now this is not in English law, but this existed in English law. I don't know if everybody remembers the story of Ignaz Semmelweis, and how he was committed to an institution. His wife did that, right? Well, this went both ways. She conspired with another individual, but she was empowered to do that. And in English law and in U.S. law, if a woman declared her husband mentally unfit, the same process existed to put him in an institution as existed to put her in an institution. It's just that women had, if you put your husband in an institution, if he didn't have a source of income that you could access without him having to work to earn more of it to replace what you were using up, it was, cutting your nose off to spite your face. But if a guy had property and he had a source of income that just was self-replenishing because of its nature, then a woman could institutionalize him and take control over it.
Yeah, no, I actually read Laura Kinsale is one of the greatest romance novelists of our time. And she wrote a book about a Quaker woman and I guess he was like an earl or something like that. But he had a stroke and his family wanted to have him committed, and like they conspired to, and she was his caregiver right after he had this stroke. And but it's like, because this is mostly passive income, it just needs to be managed, right? You just need somebody to sign the checks and and forward the stuff, right? And they tried to they tried to commit him and just usurp his entire estate, and because he had a stroke and he wasn't able to communicate properly, right? And it's like, so you kind of, when you look at how all of these things operate, yes, a woman can commit her son or her brother or her husband, or her father, right? It could always commit them to a sanatorium, right? Always, always, always. And it bears mentioning that Ignaz Semmelweis died 3 weeks, I think, after being committed, because
of sepsis.
He suffered such a beating, and he died of sepsis, which was the condition that he was trying to cure with his program of doctors washing their hands in chlorinated lime between when they were examining corpses and doing autopsies and when they were delivering babies. So this man was responsible for a 90% reduction in childbed death, childbed fever deaths, over the course of his, I don't know, I think it was like 12, 18 months of his experiment, where he had the doctors at his hospital washing their hands. And then when he presented his data to the hospital administrators and said, like, he couldn't explain it, germs hadn't been discovered yet or invented yet, I guess you could say. You know, he went and he presented the data, but it didn't fit the medical model of the time, which was the nervous excitation theory of disease, and miasma, which is like, so you either get sick because you get too excited and aroused, or you get sick because of bad air. And so, yeah, they canceled his little project there. They fired him, canceled his little project, and all the death rates went right back up through the roof. And
but the point,
and feminists would probably tell you that the reason that the doctors caused more deaths than the midwives, because this is what he noticed, was like, why are all these poor women having better outcomes than all these rich women? Right? Well, it's because the rich women get their babies delivered by doctors and the poor women get their babies delivered by midwives. Right? And so all the feminists would say, well, that just means midwives are more skilled, when what it really means is midwives don't engage with people who have communicable diseases, and they don't do autopsies. They don't do post-mortem.
Yeah, the midwife argument is basically the argument that none of the advancements that took place in medical science over the last few centuries should have happened, because those advancements, a lot of them occurred due to the process of studying dead bodies. Midwives didn't do that. And that's, you know, but the whole point of that little diversion to him was this thing that feminists have said men could do to women, and it was evidence of sexism because men could do it to women. Women could also do it to men.
And he was an example of it.
And he was an example of it.
Okay, so let me continue on with my write-up, pointing out that, one, he's referring to an opinion piece that's framing the law as anti-woman, and the reason why people do this is because it just gets people to do what they want. It gets attention on issues. This is, we have, as a culture, and this is statistically proven, we want to save women from things. Now, whether or not that's biological or cultural, it's a debate for another day. But let me continue with the rest of this. So, going through his sources, he cites Blackstone, which, you know, that makes sense. Even though Blackstone himself may have dealt in some misinterpretations of the law. Then he cites The History of Pleas to the Crown by Hale W. And I'm not exactly sure why, because most of what he covers is in Blackstone. Perhaps he's just, I don't think he actually talks about it. So who knows? But anyway. And also, like, there's no way to go from Barbara Smith's opinion piece, which is the majority of what he's talking about. So again, he's looking at a feminist opinion on the law, a feminist from the 1850s opinion on the law of the time, and presenting that as the actual law. He's presenting an opinion on the law as the actual law. And his own sources actually contradict him. If you look at Blackstone, 100% men were obligated to women's debts. 100% they were, the assumption was that if a woman engaged in crime, she did so as a result of her husband's influence. If he was in the room, he likely had no ability to say that it was, you know, my husband, my wife pilfered the silver while I was in her presence, but I didn't intend her to do that. I was trying to stop. It didn't matter. He was going to be considered to be responsible for it.
Because he didn't stop her.
But so this is in Blackstone. So in the stuff he cites actually contradicts a lot of the stuff he says, because he's basing it mostly on a feminist opinion, on the intent behind law, on the actual effect of the law. And that feminist, I mean, it's an opinion piece. It's basically, like I said before, a Guardian article of the time. And then he cites a case in which a woman attempts to game the system by appealing to coverture. I'm going to just try to find that case because it's so in this case, just a second. It's in 1966. Or wait, was it in 1966? Just let me see. Yeah, it was in 1966. It was the United States versus Yazzle. And what I believe happened, to give it just a brief summary, is she appealed to coverture to get out of something that a law or a obligation that she had agreed to. Let me just pull it up here. The Small Business Administration made a disaster loan to Yazzle and to his wife, who is respondent here, following flood damage to their shop in Lampasas, Texas. The loan was individually negotiated. The chattel mortgage, which secured the loan, specifically made reference to Texas law in several respects. After default by the Yazzles on the note and foreclosure of the mortgage, the government brought this suit against the Yazzles for the deficiency. Respondent, Mrs. Yazzle, moved for summary judgment on the ground that under Texas law of coverture, she had no capacity to bind herself personally to the contract on the facts of this case, and hence the contract could not be enforced against her separate property. During the negotiation of the loan, the SBA had at no time indicated an intention that the Texas law in this regard would not apply, nor had the SBA required respondent to have her disability of coverture removed pursuant to Texas law. The district court granted the motion for summary judgment, and the Court of Appeals affirmed against the government's contention that even in the absence of any express federal statute or regulation on the matter and any indication of the loan contract itself, questions of capacity to contract with the SBA and to subject property to liability on such a contract are governed by federal and not local law, and that federal law should not recognize the state coverture doctrine. Held, there is no federal interest which requires that the local law be overridden in this case in order that the federal government be enabled to collect supervention of the state law of coverture. To collect in supervention of the state law of coverture is not necessary to decide whether the state law applies by reason of adoption of the federal law. Okay, so essentially, as usual, the banks won, but the point was that this woman attempted to use the law in her favor.
Oh, there's a law.
No, wait. If the law was 100% men exploiting women, how is this a situation where a woman uses it in her favor?
Yeah,
and you wouldn't have expected that to work.
Yeah, how would this not have occurred in history, where women would use this law in their favor, not just against the government, not just against the banks, but against their husbands and their husbands' interests?
Okay, there's a more recent example of a woman appealing to coverture, particularly the law basically requiring that husbands be obligated for the criminal acts of their wives, and that happened in the UK. It was like less than 10 years ago. It was less than 10 years ago, and there was like some politician and his wife, and they were driving, and I think he was a little tipsy. And so when they got into a crash, they switched places before the police arrived. And she claimed that that she was not responsible because she was under the influence of her husband, and under coverture laws, she cannot be held responsible for things that her husband told her to do.
Mm. And what was the outcome?
Oh yeah, no, it got like knocked down. She got like kicked out of the courtroom, right? But I think it was over a drunk driving incident. It might have been out of over a money laundering incident. Like
it was just like an incident of malfeasance, basically.
That she participated in, and then she tried to claim.
Well,
that,
even today, if a man and a woman commit a crime together, or a woman commits a crime and she thinks there's a chance, she will blame the man to throw him under the bus, to get lenience from the court, or to get concessions from the court, or to get out of accountability. And it's to the degree that the Star report, Sonia Starr, when she was investigating the discrepancies and disparities between conviction rates for women and conviction rates for men in cases where they have the same contributing factors. That's one of the things that she found, was that anytime there was a man in association, even loose association with a woman's crime, the woman could throw the man under the bus to get less likely arrest, less likely prosecution, lower rate of conviction, and more lenience in sentencing. And also, even after the fact of sentencing, to get into programs or appeal to people in administrative positions within the prison system to get her sentence shortened. So
early release.
And then there are some programs that are just available to women to get early release as well. So it's just it's always been this way, and it still is this way.
It's a continue. They were basically, with coverture, they were basically just putting in law this custom that we have where we want to absolve women of the responsibility of their actions. It's like we want to protect the physical body of the woman over recognizing the moral agent inside it. And it's just it's a continuous thing throughout history. And coverture just seems to be codified in law, that particular custom, which continued after coverture was challenged.
After coverture never really went away.
But at least it placed limitations on women. And for all of you guys listening on the vertical or wherever the hell you're listening, I got 4 words for you: Paul Bernardo, Karla Homolka.
Oh, God.
Okay?
Yeah.
Paul Bernardo, Karla Homolka. Right?
Mm-hmm.
These were 2 serial rapists and murderers, right? She groomed and lured her sister and drugged her little sister, right? So that she and her husband, okay, Paul Bernardo, could rape her and kill her while she was unconscious. All right. And she was given a plea deal on a promise to sing against her husband. And hours later, less than a day later, the investigators, after this deal was made, investigators found videotapes of her. She said she was an abused woman and she really didn't want to go along with it. And she was reluctant the whole time, right? Found videotapes of her eagerly participating in every single rape and every single death.
And also,
and the court ruled that the prosecution couldn't go back on their deal. So now she's somewhere in frickin' Quebec with 3 kids, married to a fucking doctor, right? And everybody's trying to protect her. She's like in the witness protection program. It's not fair. It's not fair that other parents don't want to let their kids go on play dates with this bitch.
Yeah. And not only did she also was an instigator in a lot of it, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No,
she was choosing victims and actively telling him what to do. And
no, she was.
This is par for the course, guys. You guys, you got to understand.
And
right?
She wasn't just choosing the victims. She was the one who got the victims to trust her because she's a woman, right? So she was like, oh yeah, no, come on over. It's fine. We're both women. You know, I understand you might feel a little weird going over to a stranger's house, right?
What you got to understand,
because I'm in the car and I'm a woman.
Okay,
what you got to understand is, in general, when men are criminally violent, it's mercenary. They want property, or they want, to get out of a situation or to get a situation. It's not usually an act of just blatant torturous cruelty to hurt someone and enjoy being sadistic. But when women are predatory, and I can tell you this from experience, when women are predatory and when women are violent, they do it to be mean. They do it to hurt someone. They do it to enjoy seeing your suffering. They will look at your face when you're crying and snot is running down your lip, and they will laugh at you, and they will smile, and they will get off on it. And it's not that women in general are horrible people or that men in general are amoral. It's that when you get somebody that is that level, the cruel ones are usually female. And the mercenary ones are usually male.
Well, let's put it this way. Like the majority of workplace bullying is done by women to women. The majority of online bullying is done by women to women. Mm-hmm. The majority of domestic abuse is done by women to women, at least proportionately. The majority of sexual abuse in prisons is done by female inmates to female inmates. Like it's the funny thing is that men are definitely the targets of women, and when a man is a target, it's almost like he has no defense. It's just like a woman can destroy his life. But often women go after other women even more than they go after men.
Yep, so and she'll show her worst self, her cruelest, most heartless, evil self, her lizard self to you, and do the most harm she possibly can, and cause the most pain she possibly can. And then the moment accountability steps in the room, whether it's in the form of an adult when you're kids, a person who's in charge of whatever forum you're in, if it's a forum, or police when a crime has been committed, she turns into a kitten. Right? Her eyes get wider, her cheeks get pink, her tears will flow, her hands will be folded. It'll be your fault. It'll be a misunderstanding. It'll be something she didn't mean to do. It wasn't as big as it really was. It wasn't as bad as it really was. Most of the things you said didn't happen. All of that will come out. And if you're male, you're fucked. But if she's prettier than you and you're female, you're also fucked.
Yeah, or if she can affect victimhood better than you can, you're fucked. Even if she's not as attractive as you, if you are more stoic.
If you've learned to handle trauma without openly panicking and crying.
Yeah, or if you're more stoic in any way or more masculine in any way, you're fucked.
You're
fucked. Brian. As far as I know, we haven't watched a single moment of this.
Well, because we're going through his sites and his low bar. But anyway, so we went through this particular case in which a woman tried to use coverture to game the system and avoid a debt. And you, Karen, brought up a series of cases, or at least one case in which a woman used the coverture law to try to avoid legal culpability for criminal action.
Yeah,
and then we got into a bit of a segue on Karla Homolka, which understandably led to us talking about when women do things, they tend to be much more.
When women are psycho.
They tend to be much more vindictive. And so that's where all that happened. Now we can continue on with his cites. So the next citation he has refers to a husband taking out a mortgage on their house without his wife's knowledge. He used the loophole in the law to try to defend his actions. All right. So essentially, he got her on the hook. Like he basically took the marital property, used it as a mortgage for I think it was some shady business. It failed. And he was trying to leave her with the debt, essentially. Or
leave her with half the debt.
Well, I'm not sure if it was half because but regardless, so the ultimate decision of the court in that was to actually appeal to federal law to quash the man's claim. So again, we see a court deciding the way it works is if a woman goes up against the bank or the legal system, they will essentially say nope. If a woman goes up against the husband, they will usually, or as far as I can tell, not just find in favor of the wife, they will end up looking at the law in terms of, is there any way for men to exploit this and start changing the law, which is what's been happening. But my overall point is that he uses this case, and this is an edge case. Like, this is something that came about through a confluence of very specific factors that doesn't apply anywhere in the U.S. Louisiana was part of French territories. So the law in Louisiana is either an inheritance of the Spanish or the French legal system. So and probably
it's a little more complicated than that. It's also it's a mix, because as the United States expanded across its territory, English common law spread with it, because the original colonies were under English common law. So you end up with sort of a mix of French tradition and English tradition and American ingenuity. But what you're talking about is essentially this. Anytime a man would lose a case going up against an entity from outside of his household, a woman wasn't necessarily always able to use womanhood and coverture and all of that to win the case, right? Sometimes she was, but when it was banks, when it was the government, a lot of times she wasn't, because they ran over everybody. But when it was the husband versus the wife, anytime coverture's protection of women was called into play, whatever factor was being tried based on coverture's protection of women would rule today. So if women would find a way to argue that what their husband was doing was abusive, they would win. If the man could find a way to argue that her actions that he was trying to stop, or whatever conflict they had, involved her putting herself at risk, and he was trying to protect her from that risk, then that was the only way he could win. Coverture was the shield between the woman and the state, between the woman and the law, between the woman and the establishment. That was all it was.
And the outside world.
Right? It made him her bodyguard. It made him her legal personhood guard. It made him, and it did not eliminate women's legal personhood. Blackstone was wrong about that. And there have been multiple critics who have proved that. And we read one last week. And this guy that we're looking at on this screen here turned around and pointed back to Blackstone and said, Blackstone can't be wrong about that. This woman who said he was wrong about that doesn't know what she's talking about, because Blackstone said this.
Yeah,
which was exactly the same thing that he pointed back to, the thing that we debunked as evidence of itself. That is circular reasoning. Only idiot does that.
Okay, and I wanted to just speaking to that. So a lot of these protections are being were destroyed over the last century. So the function of a man as protecting his wife from the state no longer holds. So now when women appeal to these old laws to try to protect themselves from the interests of banks or the state, they're like, no sale. However, this particular case, I'm going to read from the summary. In 1974, the husband of Apele. Okay, Karen, how do you pronounce this?
You're going to have to spell it.
Appellee. Apelli. Fenestra.
Yeah, that.
Apelli. I just needed the help with that. Fenestra.
AAPPELLEE.
We got it. So without her knowledge, executed a mortgage in their jointly owned home as security on the husband's promissory note to the appellant. The husband executed the mortgage pursuant to a now superseded Louisiana statute, Article 2004, that gave the husband the unilateral right to dispose of jointly owned community property without his spouse's consent. In 1976, after Apele refused to pay her husband's note, appellant commenced
it's the appellee.
Appellee refused to pay her husband's note. Appellant commenced foreclosure proceedings and instituted the instant action in federal district court for declaratory relief. Appeal asserted a counterclaim challenging the constitutionality of Article 2404, and Louisiana and its governor were joined as third-party defendants on the counterclaim. The district court granted the state's motion for summary judgment, while appellee.
There's an appellant and an appellee.
An appellant who's repellent. An appellee.
Okay, it's like ant and e. Okay, I'm the litigant and you're the litigee. Right? I'm the payer and you're the payee. Okay.
Appeal to the Court of Appeals was pending. Louisiana completely revised its community property code provisions so as to grant spouses equal control of the disposition of such property. Because the new code did not take effect until January 1st, 1980, it did not control the mortgage executed by the appellee's husband. The Court of Appeals held that Article 2004 violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, but limited its decision to prospective application because the ruling would create a substantial hardship with respect to their property rights and obligations within the state of Louisiana. Now, no doubt that law that allowed the husband unilateral right to dispose of jointly owned community property was an inheritance from maybe Salic law, where I believe the situation for men and women is a little bit more strict. But here's the thing. A lot of the cultural traditions that go lockstep with those kinds of laws have a big expectation that men protect and provide for women. And that if a man doesn't do these things, he's basically a persona non grata. Like I've experienced that kind of thing. Like, the South, and this would be the cultural inheritors of this particular legal system. So these are the customs that are paired with these laws. If a man doesn't provide for his wife, he is scum. It is actually just he basically might as well not exist. And this is also the law that gave rise to Pride and Prejudice, that initial phrase or initial sentence. A man with any kind of wealth is in search of. It's a well-known truism that if a man has any kind of wealth, he's in search of a wife. Essentially, that is an expression that the community believes that wealth belongs to one of their daughters. So these are the customs that come parcel with these kinds of laws, that inheritance goes strictly to the first son or the first relative, according to some kind of mathematical formula. This is the custom that these laws come out of, which is this kind of strict depersoning of men who do not protect and provide for their women, and also an incredible suspicion of bachelors. So even if a guy's a wealthy bachelor, he is expected to get a wife by the community, or he is going to be frozen out. And if he gets frozen out, he may find that his fortunes dwindle rapidly, because all of the business opportunities are going to dry up. So this is what I was talking about. You can't take these laws outside of their social customs, because their social customs inform their application and inform where they're going to be where they're going to be an issue. If a woman lives in a world where a man, if he doesn't provide for a woman, if a bachelor doesn't take a wife, if that husband doesn't provide for his wife, he is going to be socially ostracized and basically face his own financial ruin. If the community can do that, then the idea that he's disposing of their property doesn't become a danger to her, because she has the power of social custom to call upon to ensure that he only deposes it in a way that benefits her. And if he doesn't, he's going to catch shit from the rest of his community. And that may be why for a long period of time these laws weren't challenged, because they came part and parcel with the strict expectation that men put their wealth to the service of women. And in absence of that expectation, you could have a situation where men just were gay bachelors for all their entire lives.
Well, they never. You couldn't really, because throughout history, when there have been laws that addressed even suspected same-sex relationships, women could be bosom happy bachelor. I was going to say, women could get away with it. Women could be bosom buddies, right? But men were killed for being gay historically. Women were not. Men were punished even when they weren't killed. They were punished by institutionalization before women were. They were punished by incarceration when women were not. And they were punished by forced marriage just as much as women were. So being single, like a woman might get embarrassed by being single. She'd get called an old maid. She'd get told she should be married and stuff like that. But nobody did anything legally to her to, if she was suspected of being an old maid because she had a preference for women instead of men. People thought that was a curiosity. If a man was accused of being single, or it was men's fault, right? But if a man was accused of being single because he had a preference for men over women, that put his life in danger. And even when it didn't put his life in danger, it put his whole livelihood, his social life, his ability to move about in public, every aspect of his life, basically, in danger. It was a huge, huge thing. And the other end of that, historically, is this. Women couldn't be single parents without pointing a finger at somebody. Whereas men, if they were single parents, they had to deal with the fact that if the mother who abandoned the child was alive, she could continue to fight their parenthood throughout history. And although Carolyn Norton faced issues because her husband was rich, if Joe Blow, the poor guy, was in that situation, it was an entirely different story. The entire community would rally against him if he kept his wife's children from her, whether they were his children too or not. And during the reforms after the Great Plague in Europe, when Queen Elizabeth I was trying to address, the dirty bomb that hit the economy with, she did a bunch of things that would be very familiar to people if they read through the Welfare Reform Act of 2000 in the United States. One of those things was, if a woman was a single mother, the state had the right to obligate her to point the finger at the father, and they would track him down for money. If she was reliant on workhouse, the workhouse could go after the father. If you had a family member that was reliant on a workhouse, you might get tracked down by the state if you had any property or any money and asked to pay for their upkeep, even if they were working. So you had this situation where even if a man abandoned a pregnant woman, even if a man abandoned his wife and children, the state would track him down and go after him for money. And like, women were protected. And it was because the state didn't want its coffers being drained by women who did not have an attached man supporting them. So this protection wasn't just between married couples. It wasn't just between women and their families. It was a whole protection of the state from women's lack of accountability, as well as protection of women from the long arm of the state.
But just to get back to this particular case, so the husband used the loophole in the law to try to defend, well, essentially what happened is they used the loophole in the law to take out a mortgage that he then left in his wife's, dumped in her lap. And the people that he took out a mortgage with wanted to basically collect, but they were then prevented by this ruling, in which they said no. The court basically appealed to the 4th Amendment or the 14th Amendment to throw this out, right? So they protected the woman's assets. And despite the fact that, this was a woman up against a bank now. So that in this case, they ruled in favor of the woman. Okay. So that's, but it's interesting because, again, they rule against coverture when it's the interests of a woman. So it's like, it goes back and forth as the cultural attitudes change. You see different assumptions being made, different results happening in the law. But what I wanted to point out is that this law is apparently unique to Louisiana, right? And the way that they approach changing this law, and this is why I brought up that it had a different legal inheritance. Like the Louisiana law, I believe, comes from French and probably a combination of French and Spanish. There's a debate, but regardless, it's more distinct from the usual English common law, which is the rest of the country. And if you think about it, when people correct English common law in terms of coverture and attempt to protect women from its supposed excesses, those corrections aren't going to easily apply to another legal system from a different inheritance. Right. Okay. So what happened with the Louisiana law is that it's been revised piecemeal since like the early 20th century. So they've been trying to fix this. They just haven't been, they've been like the Jenga tower. They're just trying to carefully pull out pieces. And they know that the only way that this is going to totally be fixed and all of these loopholes removed is by letting the Jenga tower crash and rebuilding it. But they don't want to do it because it's going to be an absolute legislative pain in the ass. So they've been patching it piecemeal to try to protect women, but still, you patch it one here and then there's another loophole and all of this other stuff. But the overall thrust of the changes to this law have been trying to protect women while retaining the very conservative nature of law itself. And this is being presented, this edge case. So we're looking at a situation where the law itself is from a different inheritance. So it's from a different system, or at least it inherits from another system. So fixing it is going to be complex. They have been fixing it in favor of protecting women's rights, but they can't apply the fixes of the English common law to this particular law system. So it's more complicated, it's slower. And he's presenting this like people in Louisiana off doing their own thing as some kind of commentary on all women in the states. Yeah, you can present this as
women, I'm curious, where is this guy from?
You could present this as a legal oddity, but you can't present this as a case that applies to women generally in the states. And in fact,
or women generally anywhere.
Yeah, right. In fact, it says the opposite. It says the opposite.
It might be that he doesn't understand. If he's not from the United States, he wouldn't understand the fact that. Oh, is he? So he's just being disingenuous then.
Yes,
that's a common thing feminists do with regard to women's experiences versus men's experiences. If something happens to one woman, it's common to all women to them. If one man does something, it's common to all men to them. But if a man experiences something, or 100 or 1,000 men, those are all anecdotal evidence and they don't count. And similarly, if women do things, those are all anecdotal evidence and they don't count. That's a consistent issue with arguing with feminists.
Okay, so he basically found the edgiest of edge cases to argue his point. And the only reason that these laws ended up this far into the late 20th century is because of the complexity of the legal issues in Louisiana. And they were trying to fix it without destroying, like totally bowling over the Jenga tower. They were trying to fix it. And the history of that law is a history of piecemeal fixes. So they had the will to fix it. They just didn't want to have to tear everything up and start over again.
They might also not have had an instance where they needed to do anything about it in a moment. Well, there's another thing that, and I don't know if this is
every instance that existed where women were being taken advantage of. They went back to the law and tried to patch it. But because they didn't want to start from scratch replacing it, that has nothing to do with oppression of women. It's just bureaucrats gonna bureaucrat, you know.
Well, there's another aspect to this, right? A lot of these fixes are case law. Case law only happens when there's a case.
Yes.
And so I don't know if other countries probably do have to do this as well, but in the US, there is an actual profession among lawyers, like a sort of subsect of being a lawyer, where you take the job of working with cities and counties and states, because there's city law, there's county law, there's state law, and then there's federal law, to go through their books and find laws on the books that are outdated and remove those laws, because it doesn't need to be illegal in a particular community to walk down the street with an ice cream cone in your back pocket, because somebody's horses are not going to come after that and cause a complete and utter chaotic accident in the middle of the street now. Like that's that's one that actually.
Are you talking about why the postmaster of general of I think it was Illinois was not allowed to shoot ducks?
Right.
And why you're not allowed to walk an elephant down Market Street in New York City without a leash?
And there are some cities that have removed spitting on the sidewalk laws because tobacco doesn't eat through concrete the way that it eats through wood, and sidewalks aren't wooden anymore. So, but those are usually not northern states because it does freeze. So if you spit a lot on it, but spittoons are not out in front of businesses anymore, so a lot of those laws don't really matter. So in cases with coverture type laws, when something like that survived on the books for years and years, it was because there was no contention, there was no challenge, there was no abuse of it that was so bad that the woman felt compelled to take legal action. And there was no legal action taken against the woman on the basis of that law, where it was drawn to the attention of the court that, hey, this is unfair and wrong and needs to be changed.
Okay, so that particular law, 2404. Let me just go back here. I got a lot of stuff I'm juggling.
Okay.
Statute 2404, Civil Code Law 2404. It has a history of being amended. The need for modernization of the Louisiana community property law was seriously discussed as early as the 1930s. In the Maine, this reform was contained in LA Acts 1978 and 1980, which were instigated by this particular case. But it has been attempted to be, it's been being addressed for a long time.
Okay. Let me just give you an example of how things change in the law. Okay. Roe v. Wade was overturned after 50 years. Okay. How did that happen? Because I think it was Mississippi. They signed into law a 15-week abortion ban. 15 weeks, right? So you can get abortion on demand for 15 weeks for no reason or any reason at all. And then, like you're going to get a haircut, might as well have an abortion while you're at it, right? And then after 15 weeks, it was life of the mother or, serious deformity, rape, incest, stuff like that, right? Okay. The abortion clinic in Mississippi, Jackson Women's Health, decided that this was not good enough. This was not a good enough compromise, right? Abortion for no reason or any reason up to 15 weeks. And then after that, you can still get an abortion if you have a good reason. Okay. Not good enough. So and this was in 2018, 2017, something like that. Anyway, they launched this lawsuit. They sued the state of Mississippi, or Mississippi's public health director or secretary, sued him and in federal court, and because it wasn't good enough, right? And of course, it takes time to, but it's important to realize, okay, they knew Trump was in office. Okay, they knew that Breyers was resigning and Trump would get to appoint his replacement. They knew that Scalia had died and Trump had replaced him, and they knew that RBG could barely hold her head up. She was on her fucking deathbed, right? And about to die, right? And they still poked the fucking hornet's nest, right? The only reason Roe v. Wade was overturned was because Jackson Women's Health didn't think a 15-week free-for-all on abortion was good enough and launched a lawsuit when they had to have known that there would be a 6-3 majority conservative court coming soon. Right? Yeah. And they did it anyway. So congratulate yourselves. Congratulations. You played yourself. Right? Play that soundbite, Brian. Right? Congratulations.
I don't think I have
you
that
played
one.
yourself. Right? Because that's the only reason. Because you need to have a court case. You need to have a lawsuit in order for case law to happen, in order for a previous decision, a previous precedent to be overturned, right? You need to.
So basically, they brought the case that destroyed Roe v. Wade, and they were.
This is the thing.
Brought the case that destroyed Roe v. Wade, and now they're whining about it.
Okay, but
this is a thing that women do and have done repeatedly throughout history, of waiting until just the wrong moment to poke like that, and then having a fit when it doesn't go their way.
Or just repeatedly slapping a man and then like acting like the victim when he hits them back.
Yeah, but let's get back into this. So the history of this particular law, the legislature. So I'm now going to talk about the commentary on this particular law. The legislature has over the years adopted stopgap measures to bring Louisiana women, just Louisiana women, because the law that we're talking about
only applies to Louisiana. Yeah,
only applies to Louisiana because they have the particular patchwork of Spanish and the legal to the 21st century. So to bring Louisiana women into the 20th century along with every other woman in America. So he's presenting this as evidence of something, and I just learned from the vertical or the horizontal chat that he is from the UK. So, but nevertheless, on the eve of the reform, the legal regime bore a striking resemblance to the model of French and Spanish inspiration contained in the Digest of Civil Laws, 1808. Certain things acquired by the spouses during marriage were classified as community assets and were controlled by the husband as head and master. During the series of laws beginning in 1912, led to the requirement that the wife's consent be obtained to mortgage, lease, or sell community property when her name appeared on the title. So I'm guessing this guy sort of gamed the system by putting her name on the title of something that she wasn't on, or no, taking a mortgage out on something that she may not have been on title. After 1921, the wife was able to file a declaration requiring her consent to the mortgage or sale of the family home. In 1970, the Code of Civil Procedure was amended to give the wife the exclusive right to sue for her earnings. In 1975, the wife was given the power to obligate her earnings for debts she had incurred before or during the marriage. All right, so, and then there's a debate on where this particular Louisiana law comes from. So he's talking about a state that's sort of floating off in its own world, right? And that's why you can see that these laws have continued into the later half of the 20th century, because this is a complex situation, and it's complex because Louisiana has a complex history. It wasn't just an English colony. I think it was French, and it looks like the Spanish were involved somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So not only does he not clarify that we are talking about a very complex legal situation, and that the legal situation, the people involved with it or were aware of it, were trying to fix the situation for women, probably based on cases brought before the court. So each one of these corrections probably represents a case by a woman, and then the legislators wanting to protect her from, or protect future women from, the problems that she faced. So we are looking at a very strange law. We are looking at the social will to fix it to protect women, but not necessarily the social will to scrap it all. And we're looking at a legal system that is difficult to extrapolate the changes to the English common law to it. So we're looking at a very strange situation. Like, this man has presented a purple sheep and said, all sheep are purple. No, sir. This sheep is dyed. It is dyed purple. But the other thing is that he omits, and this is what I was talking about with the customs, the expectations in these particular cultures that men protect and provide for women. Like, they're more conservative cultures. They have a higher expectation that men protect and provide for their wives. So he completely omits the liability of the husband for the contractual obligations of his wife, Louisiana legislation, and jurisprudence. So he admits, not only is he presenting his purple sheep as a commentary on the color of all sheep, he's also omitting all of the expectations put on men in this legal system, which who knows if they were actually addressed. Okay, so as a result of their marriage, the husband owes his wife certain duties. Article 119 states that he owes her support, and Article 120 provides that he is obligated to furnish her with whatever is required for the convenience of life in proportion to his means and condition. So no, this is another thing that feminists constantly bring up. Oh yeah, he was obligated, but not more. He would let her live in poverty. No, she had to live in the same within his means. So that is, if he was a rich man, she had to live richly. Okay. If he was middle class, she had to live middle class. He was obligated to his own material standing. He was obligated to provide his wife.
Yeah, no, and okay, this also translates into alimony law, which used to be not tied to the ex-husband's income. It used to be tied to, like, the ex-husband's current income used to be tied to the conditions under which she had become accustomed to being supported, right? That was what he had to pay. He had to pay her to live within circumstances similar to those to which she had become accustomed during the marriage, right? Regardless of what his current financial situation is today, right? Regardless of whether the divorce made him, like Dave Foley of Kids in the Hall and News Radio fame, right? Dave Foley, his alimony and his child support was assigned based on the year before News Radio, the year before Phil Hartman was killed by his wife, and News Radio was canceled. Okay, and so it was like the #1 show when his wife divorced him, and that's what he had to pay, and that's what he continued to have to pay according to Ontario law, right? Because reasons, right? So here's this guy, he goes from like making millions of dollars a year, right, to being lucky if he can get a $25,000 gig, right, over the course of a week, and he's just like, yeah, no, and he ended up having to move permanently, seek refuge, seek asylum in the United States. He never set foot in Canada again until all of this finally was resolved, because what the courts were telling him was, well, you owe millions and millions and millions of dollars, right, in child support and alimony, And if you ever set foot in Canada again, you're going to be arrested. You're going to go to prison. We'll hold you in prison for 6 months and demand that you pay up because we think you're hiding the money. We think you're just refusing to pay, right? And then we'll let you out and you'll have another hearing. And if you don't have the money then you go back to prison for another 6 months, which is basically a sentence to spend the rest of your life in prison with a hearing every 6 months that you can't win, right? And that was his situation because she divorced him at the optimum time, right? And so she's traveling all over the world with the kids and everything, and she's going to Morocco on vacation and all of this, right? And he's like desperately seeking gigs from some like little bachelor freaking suite in LA, right? Trying to find enough work, right? To just pay the interest on his child support debt.
Yeah, we hear all the time how debtor's prison has been eliminated and there is no such thing. But if you're a man who owes child support, it's very, very real. And it's that way in the United States, it's that way in Canada, and it's that way in the UK. I believe it's that way in pretty much every country where English common law was the predecessor to the legal system, and probably also in countries where it wasn't, because the government doesn't want to take responsibility for women who don't take responsibility for themselves.
If you're in Iran and your wife divorces you with cause, or you divorce her without cause, you owe her that. I don't know what it might be. You know, some of the men that I've talked, Muslim men that I've talked to say it's like often between $30,000 and $120,000, right? Paper debt. And you owe her that, and you owe her that within a very limited time frame. I think it's like a month, right? And if you or your family can't pay her that, you go to prison.
All right.
Can I read the super chow? That's
sure.
Sitting there.
But
for
after you read the super chow, we're going to go back to this Louisiana.
No, I want to go.
I think you kind of killed it already. You already
let
pretty
me
much
read
destroyed him on it.
Let me read the super chow.
What I've destroyed. Like, I know I've burnt him to ash, but I want to then.
All right, let me. Okay, can I just?
Yeah.
I'll read the super chow. Then I'm gonna mute, and you guys take over. I'm gonna make myself some coffee. So, Great Indoors gives us $10. This was from a while back, so it's referencing Hannah. And he says, no, Hannah. From what I've learned by a genuine professor, is that when women are being a bitch to each other, it's because of patriarchy. I learned that from a review of the lyrics of a remix of an awful proposed pop song. So basically, it's up there with peer-reviewed Pew Research. Absolutely. It's pop music, research. It's the same thing. All right, go ahead and you guys get back to it.
Okay. So because again, this is again, and I also got into arguments with people on that particular travesty. And again, guys, I'm just using his own sources. In fact, that was what I said to him. He's like, well, your sources are wrong. I'm like, yeah, I'm using your sources to debunk you. In this entire time that we've been talking, I haven't even brought up anything that he doesn't reference.
You beat him to death with his own arm.
Yes.
Well, she's beating me to death.
Stop hitting yourself, ex-patriarchy. But it's like this statue, he brought it up, but he brought it up without context, and he brought it up without saying, no, actually, this doesn't apply to the rest of the US. This is a purple sheep, sir. Okay.
Well, or a green patch on a patchwork quilt that he is now using to say that the whole quilt is green.
It's green. Because, so he's obligated to furnish her with whatever is required for the convenience of life in proportion to his means and condition. Because he owes his wife these duties, she may be able to bind him to third parties without his consent if he fails to satisfy his obligations. Right? So his wife has an unlimited credit to go out and get anything that he gets. He gets himself a Porsche. She gets herself a Porsche. He gets himself an expensive penthouse. She's owed the same thing.
Wagyu steak for everybody.
Yeah. Wagyu, every expensive, I don't know, gold-flecked scotch. She gets that too. So the comments underneath that video, because they are being led astray by a man who apparently doesn't actually read his own sources, basically asserted that men couldn't be made obligated to their wives' debts. Right here in black and white. Yes, they can.
Yeah.
Right. And that's in the case in Blackstone. They very clearly stated that if you are going to just assume a feminist with motivated reasoning is an actual reflection of the law, you are a fool. Right. This like going to a Guardian article and saying, oh, this must be the legal regime no, it's an opinion piece. That opinion, and it's an opinion piece with no citations of the actual law. Go read it. In this case, she binds him not just because she is his wife, but because she is his obligee. If, for example, the husband did not supply his wife with sufficient clothing, she might purchase these articles in her husband's name, and he would be bound according to the principles of negorum gestio, embodied in Articles 2295 to 2300 of the Code. Under the same factual situation, the wife might even conventionally subrogate a creditor supplying these goods to her rights against the husband. This subrogation would require an express statement that she was transferring her claim against the husband and would only be possible if the husband had not provided as he required. Oh, geez. Okay, so basically his protection is that if he doesn't give her the stuff that she asks or she demands, if he does give her the stuff
that she deserves, that he could
provide relative to his ability to provide, if he actually gives her that stuff, she can't then contract for more of it. Woo! What a protection there. The possibility that the community of Quets, and the thing is that this is the legal expectation. So if the husband says, "Hey, no, this debt isn't fair," he has to go to he has to actually sue to get rid of it.
Yep.
Like this is an insane level of liability. I don't know how to pronounce these words, but regardless, you get the
obligee.
No,
obligator and obligee.
The possibility of the community of equets and gains accords the wife power to bind her husband.
Equities and gains?
No, it's not equities. Equets. There's
how's it spelled?
ACQUETS. Equetes? Are we going with the
gotta look at it actually?
French accent?
Yeah, I'd have to look at it.
French accent, equetes.
Yeah, that does look like equets. I'm gonna. Sometimes legal terms.
Language was so much more sophisticated back then.
Equets are assets acquired by purchase, a gift or other means than inheritance. So it's probably equets, and our key concept in community and property law, because that would be acquired, acquisition, equets.
Okay.
All right.
Examining the specific provisions of the community contract, it is seen that no provision accords the wife the power to bind her husband, and under the agreement, the husband owes the wife no explicit duties. So when it comes to buying new property, the wife can't be like, "Hey, I've bought,
I bought a Porsche and a pit bull."
Yeah. No, I bought. Well, if he has a Porsche and a pit bull. A cat.
Well, it's a cat or equet, depending on what.
Well, if he buys a Porsche and a pit bull, she can make the argument there, Karen. But if she buys, I don't know, beachfront property, she might not be able to force her husband to pay for it, which could result in a liability to a third person, discharging them in the husband's name. In addition, the acts of the wife in relation to community assets cannot subject him to liability, as Article 2004 makes clear that the only acts of the husband are to affect these assets. There's at least one instance. So this is where that one woman got in, was like, I can't be responsible for the mortgage because my husband made me do it. There's at least one instance, however, in which the husband's liability for his wife's act is dependent on the existence of the, this is getting into the weeds. Anyway, it's probably boring, but regardless, he omitted the expectations placed on the husband.
Of course he did. They always do. Like, you're acting like it's some kind of fucking surprise. Okay, you've been giving me a headache. You've been giving me a headache for the last 20 minutes. All right? Okay, and you want to talk fine minutiae of law, medicine, like freaking biology, anything like that, psychology. You want to talk that kind of minutiae. I'm happy to do it. But you just freaking bludgeoned this dead horse into a fucking pulp.
Into a paste.
And then peed on the pulp.
And then I pissed all over the glue.
Yeah.
Yes, because
we still haven't gotten to the video.
Well, you know what's funny about this? I'm going to make a prediction.
4:30. I've been up since 4:30 this morning. I have not eaten yet, other than a few handfuls of peanuts.
Okay, if you want to watch it,
it is.
I need to adopt your
right
diet
now.
I have to lose 50 pounds.
Right. I am hangry. I am cranky.
And you think that watching this video is going to change any of that?
Let me make my prediction.
Just give me a reason to fucking live, because listening to you say stuff that I already know, like watching you say stuff that I already agree with, it doesn't feed my soul, honey. Okay? What feeds my soul is idiots spouting bullshit on the internet.
Well, let me make my prediction here, because this is something that I know is going to happen, right?
Well, my soul is black. It's black and it's cold.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ken.
I wasn't sure, because like it's the same thing that happens when my mic mutes without my permission.
Okay, go ahead. Speak your speech.
This guy is going to ignore everything you said. He's going to go back to the source material and claim that something in it that you just completely debunked proves you wrong.
Of course,
that's what he's going to do.
No.
We are.
He hasn't debunked
hold on.
Yet.
No, he hasn't. She has debunked him.
No, but
she's debunked him two different ways.
Are we talking about the video?
Yes.
Are we talking about the video here?
Yes. She has debunked him two different. We are.
When he filmed this video, which I hope that we will eventually be able to watch a little bit of. Okay, when he filmed it, she hadn't debunked him yet.
Actually, we've watched 7/10 of it.
Okay, all right.
But listen, she has debunked him in two ways. All right. The first way she has debunked him has been going through and proving wrong a point that is a fundamental point of his, that coverture behaved a certain way, or the society behaved a certain way around coverture, because this one obscure little case is representative, and clearly it's not. And he is mostly citing obscure little cases here and there where society had to come along and fix an outdated law. She has debunked the claim, the insinuation, that all of the laws cause society to behave a certain way based on these little anecdotal bits that actually prove that the problem was that society didn't have to change the law until there was a conflict, that things were not the way that he was claiming, that his own anecdotes, because of their nature, prove him wrong, right? And the second thing is, she proved that he doesn't know what he's talking about, doesn't understand his material, and none of his arguments can be taken seriously, because if he did that with those anecdotes that he has used, he's probably doing that with his entire argument. So pretty much debunk the entire video at that point. I mean, we can continue to watch. We can watch the last minute and
using
44 seconds.
But the thing is,
2 minutes and 44 seconds. But yeah,
I'm going to put my own prediction.
He's going to come back and claim.
This is what he's already said. He's going to tell me. He's going to tell me that he can't debunk me because he fears that it will put me in a unself-aliving state. Because I will be so absolutely shattered by the massiveness of his pulsating brain. Absolutely.
All right.
Can we listen? Can we listen to? There's literally like.
Yeah, we can listen to it.
All right,
here.
I'm gonna.
Brian, you had one job. You had one job. And it was
I'm gonna play.
To control these bitches.
I'm gonna take to. Well, you know, you all spoke.
I'm gonna be honest. I enjoyed listening to that teardown of him.
Well, I did too.
It was fun.
I'm fucking hungry.
All right.
Right?
Let's just.
Jesus.
Can we? Can we just? Let's look. Here's the thing. I think we should listen to some of it because. You're going to get people in chat saying, how do we know you debunked anything if you didn't watch the video you're responding to? So we should, I know that you know that, but that doesn't change the fact that that's how it's going to be perceived.
Okay, back to our previous video on this subject because that's where most of this is.
Yeah. We watched most of it in our last stream about this, but I'm going to finish this now.
Of married women to conduct legal contracts to some degree. It's also worth pointing out that while this case made its way to the Supreme Court, Texas's legislature repealed this protection, granting married women general contractual powers and sole control over her own property. In Louisiana in 1974, Joan Feenstra charged her husband with abusing their daughter. Her husband then mortgaged their home without her knowledge to pay for an attorney. She ended up dropping the charges and the couple separated. 2 years later, the wife learned about the mortgage and refused to pay, arguing that the state's head and master laws, another law based on coverture, that granted a husband the right to make decisions about jointly owned property without his wife's knowledge or consent, was unconstitutional. And again, this went all the way to the Supreme Court.
There's something important in this.
And again,
Okay.
Oh
no!
So the first thing he said about this case, there is. The first thing he said about this case. No.
Yes.
This isn't something that we talked about. All right. The first thing he said about this case.
This is the
first
Allison
Karen. Yes. This isn't the thing that I'm bringing up is not something we talked about. The first thing he said about this case was that the wife accused him of abusing their daughter and then dropped the charge. Right. Now, if someone abused my kid and I went to court over that or went to the police over that, there is in hell, in heaven, or on this earth, in this universe that would stop me from protecting my kid. Right? I would go to jail if I had to protect my kid from abuse, from wrongdoing.
Yeah, sort of.
So what did this woman do? Did she falsely accuse her husband to try to manipulate him and force him to go to court and then drop the case because she couldn't win because it didn't happen? I'm curious about that. Is this self-inflicted? Did she do this because she thought she was going to get something out of it, and then when she wasn't, she dropped it? No, is this a self-inflicted situation?
She accused him, okay,
mm-hmm.
In order to secure a divorce.
Right, and then she dropped it.
That's what she did.
So it was a false
dropped it when she got it. Yeah.
So it was a false allegation. She inflicted this situation, this financial situation on herself by making a false allegation against her husband to manipulate the courts in her favor.
But women literally don't do that.
I just wanted to point that out. That's it. And it would have taken 2 seconds.
Okay, let me just play more of this. I know we heard this story, but this is kind of where we left off last time. So
the court agreed that this was unconstitutional. And again, As this case was making its way through the courts, state lawmakers took steps to repeal this law in 1979. In both cases, we should point out these laws were not repealed in order to give women greater equity, freedom, and autonomy, but rather because coverture was inconveniencing and preventing collection of a debt incurred by the husband by taking the wife's assets. The 70s was also when the Equal Opportunity Credit Act was passed, preventing women from being discriminated against when applying for credit.
Wait,
No, this wasn't done to protect women from men. It was to protect banks from being unable to collect on the debts.
Even though this particular case did indeed protect
the woman from being liable for the debt, and then the law was changed to make her not liable for the debt.
And
so,
also, this is in defiance of the history of all of these laws attempting to protect women from abuses by men. Like all of the changes to this law, to this statute, which he completely ignores. Like he's not even talking about the history of this particular statute. Now, like honestly, when I hear what he talked about with this woman apparently taking a charge of abuse against her husband, it sounds like lawfare. That's what it sounds like is happening with this family or these two people. They're engaging in lawfare against each other, which is irrelevant. That's like this is just poisoning the well. It's creating irrelevant detail. The point is that this statute had been challenged far prior to this woman. For whatever reason, they didn't want to scrap the law entirely, probably because it would be on a hellish amount of work, but they had been piecemeal correcting the law. And in fact, what's interesting is that when you look at the history of the changes, even in like 1930, I believe they were questioning the use of this law, or they had changed it so that let's see. So the first one is in so a series of law beginning in 1912 led to the requirement that the wife's consent be obtained to mortgage, lease, or sell community property when her name appeared on the title. So I'm actually wondering if her name
but it was on the title.
So but how is it that this law, like if it had been amended in this way?
No, Allison, I can tell you exactly what happened.
What happened?
I can tell you exactly what happened. Her name was probably not on the title, but she had a life interest in the property.
Okay, all right.
And she had a right to refuse to allow him to sell it out from under her. And she probably, her name was probably on the mortgage, but not on the title. And I can understand why one's name would be on the mortgage, but not on the title, or on the title, but not on the mortgage, right? I've known men who their wives, were on the title and not on the mortgage. That's very convenient for those women when they decide to fuck off and take the kids back to Scotland. And a certain person will, if he ever stumbles across this, will understand who I'm referencing. But and just leave you there with a mortgage to pay and a property that you can't sell. There are plenty of situations where someone might be on the title but not on the mortgage. Somebody might be on the mortgage but not on the title. And it's like it was one of those confusing situations, because it used to be that it didn't count as joint property of the marriage until it did, right? Like, I have a 50% financial interest in this house, even though my name is not on the title, right? Legal interest in it, because I lived here. I've contributed to the mortgage. I've contributed to the renovations. I've contributed to the upkeep. And my husband and I have lived here together for 15 years or something, or actually this house 12 or 13 years now. So yeah, he wouldn't be able to sell it out from under me. I'd have to sign off on it, right? Yeah. Even though I'm not on the title and I'm not on the mortgage, and I chose not to be on the mortgage because it would have been a higher rate if I was. But yeah, it's all of this is all extremely fucking complicated, right? Because it's financial shit, it's financial law, it's marital law, it's property law, it's all kinds of different law that comes together that makes these situations where, I'm sorry, but she probably did not jointly own that property except as someone who could jointly benefit from a life interest in that property.
It's just the thing that I found really interesting about this is the whole conflict over whether or not the mortgage applied to her could have been avoided if she had just not lied about her husband in the first place.
And that's the funny thing about how all these feminist theories, they intertwine with each other. So if you say, well, it looks like based on all the things we know about the case, she lied about, the situation with her husband, she made a false accusation, then the feminist fucking, twine ball, the rat's nest of wires and theories, someone would just say, oh, but women never lie about that. So you end up going, in these Ouroboros style loops, these Mobius strips of concepts, because in order for this thing to be debunked, then you'd have to also debunk this other myth over here, which is couched in this other myth over here. So,
the example that he gave was that coverture was sexist, essentially because this woman could not exploit legal loopholes, the fact that she could lie, go to court and everything, and not get punished for it, and not have damage splatter back on her from the damage that she inflicted on him. That is this situation in reality. Whether he likes the legal applications that led to it or not.
Yeah, we're getting a little
real situation he's talking about.
No.
Yes.
Hannah.
Yes, it is.
No, Hannah. Okay. Nobody knows whether she lied. There are plenty
she
of
dropped
women.
it.
No,
she dropped it when it wasn't convenient for her anymore. I don't believe her.
There are plenty. You don't have to believe her, but you can't say she lied. There are plenty of women. There are plenty of women out there who will make a complaint, and then when it turns out that it's going to make their lives difficult, right? Cause all kinds of problems for them, right? When it's gonna maybe make them lose their livelihood. There are plenty of women out there who would choose money.
That was not this situation, though. She was in a situation where she didn't need it to win a divorce, right? She got the divorce, and as soon as she got the divorce, she stopped pursuing the case.
We're basing this all on his framing of the case. All right, so I think we're getting into the weeds over this.
Yeah, I'm not buying it. That's just it. I'm not buying it.
Your interpretation of this.
Okay. I'm not saying that's not possible, but what I am saying is, if you're a mother and you have a child, and you're like, okay, so I can get a divorce from this abusive man by by accusing him of being abusive, right? And then it brings all of this nightmarish. Dr. Oren Amate, I did an interview with him ages ago, right? Okay, he's a psychologist, and he says, well, there's two types of people, right, who gets screwed over in divorce that he sees in his office, right? And one of them is men married to any woman, okay? And the other is a woman married to an extremely intelligent and sociopathic man. Okay.
So in
and
order for your
out,
suppositions to be true, this guy had to be an extremely intelligent and sociopathic man.
Which is possible.
I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just not, if I was married to that man, okay, that man who, the extremely intelligent sociopathic man, right, very charming, okay, very convincing, and I obtained a divorce and he gave me a settlement, okay, and I could just walk away, right?
There's where you're
daughter.
making your mistake.
I
would do that. Just walk away.
No, I would do that because no, but okay, and I made a mistake. Oh, well, nobody else would make that mistake, thinking that they could just walk away. Okay, so I'm sorry, but like,
all right, guys.
No, when you're dealing with a situation like that, when you're in the situation, you can't just walk away.
Okay.
But
all right,
but I'm gonna stick with my guns on this. She could have avoided this whole thing, Brian, by not putting him in that position.
We might want to have we might want to ride them.
I'm just gonna
both have opinions on this guy's throwaway sentence. We don't even know if it actually happened. We don't know how it happened. We don't know the particulars. So
it was just an anecdote that was used.
It was an anecdote, and the real issue with that anecdote is he's using it to poison the well. Now, but the point is that this man somehow figured out a little loophole. It looks like it was in the context of some kind of lawfare, so warfare through law between these two people, right? So he didn't just do this for no reason. He did this in response to something. That's obvious. But it was but ultimately the point is that he found a loophole in a very weird legal situation that doesn't exist in the rest of the US. This guy omitted all of the obligations placed on men. Okay. So it's starting to make more sense if a man is obligated to the upkeep of his wife, that he be able to take out a mortgage to do so. Right.
Of course, that situation. The reason that I brought that up is because I deal with this all the time. I get DMs all the time from guys who are dealing with false allegations being used to facilitate divorce.
That is absolutely fine.
It is, well, that part of the law, that loophole that he had with regard to the mortgage may have been eliminated. The bit where women use allegations of either abuse of themselves or abuse of their children to manipulate the divorce course, that never stopped.
Yes.
So the part of the situation that shows that men could in some way inconvenience or harm women using the law was fixed because it was a threat to women. But the part where a woman could just run roughshod over a man in divorce court using allegations of abuse, that was never fixed. And in fact, current law exacerbates it.
Yes.
And the U.S. has exported that all over the world.
Let's get a little bit more into the video. I feel
all right, there's literally like 1 minute and some change left, so we can do this. We can do this, guys.
We can do it, guys.
To apply in their husband's name. The notion that a wife's body belonged to her husband also wasn't challenged until the 1970s, with marital grape remaining legal in some states until the 1990s. The Feenstra case.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It was not. It was not legal because during the time that that existed, that you could not accuse your partner, your spouse, of rape, or you could, but it wasn't legal to accuse your spouse of rape and get them convicted. It was still illegal to beat up your spouse, at least if a man did it. It was technically illegal if a woman did it, but that wouldn't be pursued. And under the laws during that time period, right? Or physically restrained. Under the laws during that time period, rape was not like it is today, where you can go out for drinks and dinner and go back to somebody's apartment and have sex with them and then say, well, I had 2 beers and it's not consensual, so he raped me. Like you had to prove that you tried to fight back, that you screamed, that there was some effort at subduing you and using force or coercion. Those things were illegal. So if a wife accused her husband of beating her up and holding her down, restraining her in order to obtain sex, the fact that he did those things, the fact that he did them to obtain sex, didn't excuse the fact that he did them, and he would still go to jail. They just didn't call it rape under the law. Now, feminists argue to men who say that it's legal for women to rape men today in the UK. They argue to men that no, it's not, because a woman will be charged with a crime and will face the equivalent sentencing range for that crime. It just isn't called rape. So you get it one way or the other, feminists. Either rape is legal because the crime you get charged with for doing it is called something else instead of calling it rape, or you have to concede that it was never legal for men to rape their wives.
Well, at least not and of course, completely omitted from the entire discussion, it was also legal for a woman to grape her husband.
Yes.
And still is effectively legal because there are no protections. There's no real protection in law. All right, let's listen to the last bit there. Brian, do it. Put it in the chute.
This was then brought up again in another major Supreme Court case, Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015, which guaranteed the right of same-sex couples to marry. And part of the opposing argument was that allowing same-sex marriage was changing the, quote, societal meaning of what marriage is, with Justice Ginsburg arguing that marriage today is not what it was under the common law tradition, the civil law tradition. Marriage was the relationship of a dominant male to a subordinate female, and that ended as a result of this court's decision in 1982 when Louisiana's head and master rule was struck down. So not only
I wonder if men felt very dominant when their wives were taking out expenses in their name. Or very dominant, like the law is an ass from Dickens, felt very dominant when they were fingered as responsible for things that they had no control over because their wives did them.
He just undermined gay marriage because that's not really the basis for why the law changed. The whole common law system wasn't about dominating women. It was about shielding the state from the expenses of women's sexual impropriety. Women's choice to shack up with a guy and have his babies.
I think he's quoting Ginsburg.
I know.
Ginsburg wrote
and
about
it. Ginsburg was a feminist, and so she had that attitude, and she ignored the fact that common law marriage and the laws that were common to marriage were to protect the state from the expense of women's reproductive choices. That's why marriage exists. It exists to protect the state coffers from the expenses of women's reproductive choices. So if a woman reproduces outside of a marriage, the state holds the man responsible so that the state doesn't have to be responsible for her and her children. If a woman reproduces in a shacked up situation, the state holds the man responsible. And believe you me, if she doesn't want the state to hold the man responsible, she has to fight tooth and nail. Because I did that and I had to fight it, right? And we eventually got married, but ultimately, the state held him responsible, not me. The state treats the man as at fault in those situations, regardless of who chooses to have the baby, regardless of who chooses to consent to sex, regardless of who chooses to move into the home or to not associate with the father of her baby. So all of this is the state protecting women from being put into poverty situations and the state from being responsible for its female citizens who do not take responsibility for themselves in those situations. Right? I'm abnormal because I did take responsibility. I've had 2 and 3 jobs my whole life to make up for my stupid choices. I don't like that the state pays women to make stupid choices. It's cutting our feet off to protect us from what? Success. But this guy in his claims about marriage and feminists and their claims about marriage treat the situation as if the state just put men in charge of women for no reason. That's wrong. So if that's the basis for the state allowing gay marriage, that, well, since we don't dominate women anymore, gay marriage is okay, they just undermined gay marriage. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership. The state can recognize it or it cannot recognize it. And the church can recognize it or it cannot recognize it. But if you're going to make the basis a lie, you undermine all marriage.
All right, let's finish it off. I'm going to play the rest of this, and then you guys, we can wind it down.
Baked into our governing laws, with civil and criminal law explicitly stating the expectation of subjugation of wives by their husbands, and enshrining their inability to own property, to make their own income, and generally be self-sufficient, forcing them to be at the mercy of their husband's providence. But a number of these laws were only repealed within our lifetimes. This is living memory, not ancient history. If you think patriarchy is a myth, and I strongly suggest you go pick up a history book and
yeah,
a new hat while you're at it.
Okay, that's the end of the video.
I'm not gonna wear the hat, but I am gonna point out
bowed out of actually responding to me by saying that I was too fragile to take his rebuttal, and
he couldn't back it up.
went through every single one of his sources throughout this video, as you saw, and I used them to rebut his own arguments. And he just fucked off because he's scared of a strong woman. Okay.
Well, I'm going to point something else out. He talks about the disciplinary laws regarding men and their wives. If I had a choice between, you violate a law that maybe you're not in full understanding of. If I had a choice between, well, you can let your husband castigate you for that, and then it's settled. Maybe a fine gets paid. Maybe you get spanked. Or maybe he doesn't allow you to go into that location again, that store or whatever. Okay, or you are as liable for your actions as you would be if you're a man and you go to jail for committing that crime. I'd take the spanking or being grounded, whatever, and reform my actions so that it didn't happen again. Because that's a lot easier than being locked up for a period of time and unable to do your normal life activities, your responsibilities, and so on. But yeah, sure, it was dominance and not a protection from going to jail, not a protection from the long arm of the state. If that's what you want to believe, if it makes it easier for you to be around women, to be around the women that you have to be around if you're going to be a feminist, go ahead and believe that it was beneficial to women to be able to go to jail instead of having their husband say, "Don't do that again. I'm going to take away the purse strings for a while," or "Don't do that again, or I'm going to smack you on the ass."
All right.
Honestly, some of us like a smack on the ass every
now and then, yeah. But you have to get both cheeks, or it's not equal.
No. You
you have to get both cheeks, or one gets cold.
You want all the bruising, all the subcutaneous hemorrhaging to occur in one spot. Yeah, no, so you can show it off to your friends at the water park.
There you go.
Lost Karen on the subject of spanking.
Okay.
All right.
So that's the end of the video.
Yep. Apparently he doesn't like my hat. I really like my hat though. And this is why I say that patriarchy doesn't exist.
What about does he he has nothing to say about the poppy on there? Is that not a relevant part of the hat? Oh wait, that involves men.
It's a British thing too, right? Like I don't know whether Americans do the poppy. Do Americans do the poppy?
It's not really how how we do things in America. We honor by putting up flags, and everything is about the flag.
All right, let me just go through it really quickly.
But the poppy is common to both Canada and the UK.
He is supporting his allegation that patriarchy exists in living memory based on one extremely exceptional legal situation in Louisiana, where you're talking about a territory that inherited a lot of different legal systems and had a very elaborate, I guess, legal situation from more conservative cultures.
Like I said, back in the 1960s or 70s, Canada made all of its Alberta made all of its coverture laws gender neutral, right? So life interest in property, which would be called dower rights, applied to both men and women. And my mother-in-law had a big freaking problem selling us this house because her husband, she had power of attorney over him because he was non-compos mentis and confined to a facility because she couldn't look after him. There was just no way he could be looked after in the house. He escaped several times from that facility. It was a fairly high security, and he just had issues with starting confrontations with people, and he was 6'4" and former special forces, right? British SAS and New Zealand SAS, right? So, you know, he could kill you with one thumb, and so you couldn't just let him leave him on his own, right? With a coloring book or something, right? But so he was institutionalized.
Okay, get back to the dower.
And so then she goes to sell us the house that was solely in her name, and he had already said, I don't want any, he had already, like, years before said, it's not my house, it's her house, in writing. But yeah, she still had to go and get guardianship over him. So she had to send her lawyer to go explain to a court why she needed guardianship over him, because he was not capable of signing away his dower rights, because all he'd signed away when he put it in writing that he had no interest in the house was his financial rights, his financial interest. He hadn't signed away his life interest, right? And his life interest was his right to live in the house. And so he had to consent to her selling it, even to his own son. And he was non-compos mentis by then and unable to actually sign on the dotted line to authorize the sale. So it held everything up for, like, I think it was about 6 weeks. And that's just because the coverture laws in Alberta were gender neutralized at some point, right? It used to be that they only protected women from having their houses sold out
in the great annals of history. They only protected women, but that's the point. He looks at this law. It is extremely, like, an extremely bizarre circumstance, because we're talking about atypical law within the U.S. because of the history of Louisiana. And he looks at that and he's making an assumption based on an extreme outlier. Like Hannah said, there's one square of the quilt that's green, therefore it's all green. No, that's not how it works. So he's making an assumption that all of this stuff applies up to the current era, even though even this particular statute was subject to a whole bunch of revisions throughout the 20th century to try to bring it in line with the modern era and the modern era's economic system. Because again, We're talking about law from previous economic systems. It doesn't necessarily apply to, and it's not a situation where the law is oppressing women. It just simply hasn't caught up to the current situation. But everywhere where you see that, you see lawmakers trying to make this better for women consistently. Yep. And he omits all that. He also omits all of the expectations in Louisiana law that men provide for women commiserate to their station. So a man has to provide for a woman equal to his station, equal to his income. He omits all of that. He omits the fact that women can contract debts to their upkeep that their husbands have to honor. Omits all of that and presents a very one-sided view of this. And if you buy into it, it is because you choose the position of a victim as a woman, and you have to deal with it yourself. You have to deal with that shit yourself. All right, I gotta go.
Me too. I just ate.
I'm gonna start.
All right, well, let's
so I will do the things.
Wrap it up, B.
If you want to send us a tip, and with that tip, if you'd like, you can send a comment. Very best way for you to send us whatever funds you want to support the show. feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And our monthly fundraiser isn't live yet, so we'll stow that. I'm going to hand it back to you, Brian. Sorry we're stopping so abruptly. If you guys want to continue without me, that's fine. But it looks like Karen has to go.
So.
We all have to go.
I'm done.
I'm going to speak for everybody.
So freaking done. I've been up since 4:30. It's 11:30 now. So
I find it really obnoxious. Like, it really is pissing me off. He has my hat. Like, he's showing my hat. It just, and the fact that he gets more attention, more subscribers for repeating bullshit, unsubstantiated bullshit. Again, I took them all down. These are his sources. These are the things that he thinks supports his position. They only do so because they are cherry picked, and he removes the context. All right, I'm done.
Well, they're edge cases. Yeah. All right.
Well,
okay, I'm going.
We're wrapping it up. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Allison and Karen are already gone. But thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of the Rantzerker. And we'll talk to you guys in the next video. Have a good one.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.